I never thought I would be standing here a 35-year-old widow with trembling hands. My name is Helene, and just 6 months ago, my husband James died suddenly, leaving me with a house full of memories and a mysterious garage I was never allowed to enter. For 12 years of marriage, that garage was off limits, locked away under his strict instructions. But now, facing mounting debts and the potential loss of our home, I finally gathered the courage to open that forbidden door. What I found inside wasn't just unexpected, it was life-altering. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories that prove truth is often stranger than fiction. James and I met when I was 27 and working as an elementary school teacher in our small Michigan town. It was at a charity event for the local children's hospital where he was volunteering his services as an electrical engineer. I remember being immediately drawn to his quiet confidence and gentle smile as he fixed the lighting system that had suddenly failed during the event's opening ceremony. "It's just a loose connection," he had explained, his voice calm and reassuring amid the panic of the organizers. "Sometimes the things that seem broken just need someone to reconnect them properly." I'd later think about how prophetic those words were, as James seemed to reconnect something in me that had been loose for years. After my previous relationship had ended painfully, I'd thrown myself into my career, convinced that romance wasn't in the cards for me. But James changed that with his persistent yet gentle pursuit. He asked me to coffee after the event, and our conversation flowed effortlessly for hours. He was different from other men I'd dated, more mature and grounded, despite being only 2 years older than me. Within weeks, we were seeing each other exclusively. Within months, he was introducing me to his parents and talking about the future. Our courtship was a whirlwind. 8 months after we met, James proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. The ring was perfect, a vintage oval diamond that he said reminded him of the way my eyes caught the light. I didn't hesitate to say yes. We were married in a small ceremony 3 months later, surrounded by family and friends who commented on how perfectly matched we seemed. The early years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. James was attentive and affectionate, bringing me wildflowers on random Tuesdays and leaving little notes in my lunch bag. He supported my teaching career and never complained about the long hours I spent preparing lessons or grading papers. We bought a charming colonial house with a large yard and spent weekends fixing it up together, turning it into our dream home. We did want children, and we tried for several years. After multiple disappointments and medical consultations, I learned that conceiving would be extremely difficult due to my endometriosis. James held me as I cried over this news, assuring me that he married me, for me, not for the children I could give him. "We're a family already," he insisted. "You and me, that's enough." And it did seem to be enough. We built a beautiful life together, filled with travel during summer breaks, dinner parties with friends, and quiet evenings, reading side by side on our porch swing. From the outside, and even from my perspective within our marriage, was enviable. But there was always one strange aspect to our relationship, one boundary that seemed oddly rigid in an otherwise flexible partnership. About 2 years into our marriage, James converted the large detached garage on our property into what he called his workshop. He installed new locks, improved the insulation, and ran additional electrical lines out to it. "This is where I'll work on my projects," he explained, showing me the space before the conversion was complete. "It'll be nice to have somewhere to tinker without making a mess in the house." I thought nothing of it at first. Many men had workshops or man caves, and James had always been interested in electronics and building things. But once the conversion was complete, James established a rule that struck me as odd. I was never to enter the garage, not when he was working, not when he was away, not even in an emergency. "It's dangerous in there," he insisted. "I have a lot of equipment that could hurt you if you don't know what you're doing. Plus, I'm working on some sensitive projects for clients sometimes. It's best if you just stay out entirely." I respected his privacy, though occasionally I wondered what he could possibly be doing that required such secrecy. On weekends, James would often spend hours in his garage, emerging only for meals or when we had plans. Sometimes I heard strange sounds coming from their voices or music, but when I asked, he explained it was just the radio keeping him company while he worked. Once or twice I joked about his secret laboratory, asking if he was building a time machine or plotting world domination. He would laugh and pull me close, kissing away my questions. And since everything else in our relationship was so open and honest, I accepted this one closed door without pushing too hard. Looking back, I wonder how I could have been so trusting, so willing to accept such an obvious red flag. But when you're in love, when your daily life is filled with evidence of your partner's devotion, it's easy to dismiss the occasional oddity as harmless eccentricity. For 12 years, that garage remained his exclusive domain. For 12 years, I never questioned what went on behind that locked door. And for 12 years, I believed I knew everything important there was to know about the man I married. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a Tuesday morning like any other when everything changed. James kissed me goodbye as I graded papers at the kitchen table, his coffee breath warm against my cheek. He was wearing his favorite blue dress shirt, the one I had given him for his birthday the previous year. "Love you, sweetheart," he said casually, the same words he spoke every morning before heading to work. "See you tonight." "Love you too," I replied, not looking up from my stack of fifth-grade math tests. "Don't forget we're having dinner with the Thompsons." "Wouldn't miss it," he assured me, and then he was gone, the front door clicking shut behind him. 4 hours later, my classroom phone rang. It was unusual to receive calls during teaching hours, and my stomach instantly knotted with apprehension. The school secretary's voice was unnaturally gentle as she told me I needed to come to the office immediately. My hands began to tremble before I even knew why. In the principal's office, I found 2 police officers waiting. Their expressions confirmed my worst fears before they even opened their mouths. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Officer Patterson, and this is Officer Rivera. There's been an accident involving your husband." The room seemed to tilt sideways as they explained that James had suffered what appeared to be a massive cardiac arrest while driving on the highway. His car had veered into the guardrail. By the time emergency services arrived, he was already gone. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember walking through the sterile corridors or being led to a quiet room away from the bustle of the emergency department. I only remember the moment a doctor with kind eyes and a grave expression confirmed what I already knew. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Miller. Your husband died instantly. He didn't suffer." Those words meant to comfort seemed to float past me without meaning. James, my James, was gone. The vibrant, brilliant man who had kissed me goodbye that morning now lay still in a hospital room, his body present, but everything that made him James vanished. They asked if I wanted to see him. I nodded, unable to form words. A nurse led me to where he lay peaceful as if sleeping, but with an unnatural stillness that immediately told me this wasn't my husband anymore, just the shell he'd left behind. I touched his face, still warm but cooling, and something inside me froze in response. The next days passed in a blur of arrangements and decisions. James's parents had both passed years earlier, and his only siblings lived overseas and couldn't come immediately. My parents flew in from Florida, taking charge of the funeral details while I moved through the motions like a sleepwalker. Friends from work brought food I couldn't eat. Neighbors offered condolences I barely heard. The principal arranged for a long-term substitute for my class. And all the while, I kept expecting to wake up to find James in the kitchen making coffee to discover this had all been a terrible nightmare. The funeral was held at our local church, though neither of us had been regular attendees. The place was packed with James's colleagues, my fellow teachers, neighbors, and even some of my former students who had known and liked James from school events. Several of James's relatives I'd never met appeared distant cousins who offered awkward hugs and stories about a younger James I'd never known. I stood at the front accepting condolences and thanks for coming, my black dress feeling like armor, holding my broken pieces together. When I finally returned home after the service, the house echoed with emptiness. I wandered from room to room, touching his things, breathing in the scent of him that still lingered on his clothes. That first night alone, I couldn't bear to sleep in our bed. Instead, I curled up on the couch, wrapped in his favorite sweater, staring out the window at the darkened garage. His keys were in a bowl on the coffee table, including the one to that mysterious space he'd kept private for so many years. I could have gone out there then, could have finally seen what he'd been keeping from me all this time. But some combination of respect and fear held me back. Even in death, I couldn't bring myself to violate the one boundary he'd been so firm about. so the garage remained locked and unexamined as days turned to weeks and grief became my constant companion. I took a leave of absence from teaching, unable to summon the energy or focus that 30 energetic fifth graders required. I moved through our home like a ghost, sleeping little, eating less, and avoiding the garage window with an almost superstitious dread. What secrets could be so important that even death hadn't revealed them? I wasn't ready to find out. Not yet. The months after James died were the darkest of my life. I moved through them in a fog, going through the motions without feeling connected to anything around me. 6 months passed before reality began to penetrate my grief in the form of mounting financial concerns. I was sitting at the kitchen table one morning, staring blankly at a stack of mail I'd been avoiding when the red "Final Notice" stamp on an envelope finally caught my attention. Opening it revealed that our mortgage payment was 3 months overdue, with foreclosure proceedings set to begin if payment wasn't made immediately. This jolted me into awareness. James had always handled our finances, assuring me everything was taken care of. We lived comfortably on our combined incomes, his engineering salary substantially supplementing my teacher's pay. I had never worried about money during our marriage, trusting that James had everything under control. With shaking hands, I gathered all our financial documents and made an appointment with James's financial advisor, a man named Patrick, whom I'd met only briefly at holiday parties. The meeting was a wake-up call I wasn't prepared for. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, Mrs. Miller," Patrick said, his expression uncomfortable as he shuffled through statements spread across his desk. "But there are some significant financial issues you need to address immediately." He explained that James's life insurance policy, which I'd assumed would provide substantial support, had been reduced 2 years earlier to a minimal amount. The payout barely covered the funeral expenses and a few months of mortgage payments. Even more concerning, our savings account had dwindled to almost nothing, despite regular deposits from both our paychecks. "Did James ever mention any major investments or expenses?" Patrick asked carefully. I shook my head, stunned by the revelations. "No, he always just said our finances were solid. I never questioned it." Patrick slid several credit card statements across the desk. "These were all in James's name. The balances are significant." I stared at the papers, uncomprehending. 5 credit cards, all maxed out with minimum monthly payments that totaled more than my entire teaching salary. Purchases at restaurants I'd never been to, gas stations in towns I'd never visited, jewelry stores and hotels that held no memories for me. "There must be some mistake," I whispered. "James was always so responsible with money." "I tried to discuss these concerns with him several times in recent years," Patrick admitted. "He always had explanations, but he refused my suggestions to consolidate the debt or adjust your financial strategy. I'm sorry, but you're in a precarious position financially." I left Patrick's office with a folder full of troubling documents and a mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. Where had all the money gone? What had James been hiding from me? And how was I going to keep our home when the mortgage payment was nearly twice what I could afford on my salary alone? The next weeks were a crash course in financial survival. I called creditors' negotiated payment plans and tried to understand the mess James had left behind. I returned to teaching earlier than planned, needing the income despite my still raw grief. My best friend Amanda became my financial advisor, and emotional support rolled into one. She came over weekends to help me sort through paperwork and create a budget. "You might need to consider selling the house," she suggested gently one evening as we sat surrounded by bills at my kitchen table. "It's a lot of house for one person, and the mortgage is eating you alive." The thought of selling our home with all its memories and the life we'd built together made my chest ache with fresh loss. But Amanda was right, and I knew it. I couldn't maintain the financial burden much longer without drastic changes. At the very least, Amanda continued, seeing my distress, "you could sell that detached garage. The property is zoned, so it could be separated and sold as a potential small business space or converted to a tiny home. That lot alone could bring enough to pay off the credit cards." I glanced out the window at the garage, still untouched since James's death. "I don't even know what's in there," I admitted. "He never let me inside." Amanda's eyebrows rose. "Never. In 12 years of marriage. Never. It was his private space. I respected that. "Well, now it's your private space," Amanda said firmly. "And it might be your financial lifeline. Call Jessica Morris, that real estate agent who helped my sister sell her condo. She can tell you what it might be worth." 2 days later, Jessica stood in my driveway, appraising the garage with professional interest. "The location is excellent and the structure appears solid," she noted. "With the separate driveway entrance and its own utility connections, we could definitely market this independently from the house. It's quite large, too, almost the size of a small apartment." "So it could help me get back on my feet financially?" I asked hesitantly. "Absolutely. Properties like this are in demand for home offices, artist studios, or rental units. I'd need to see the interior, of course, to give you an accurate valuation." "Of course," I agreed, though my stomach twisted at the thought. "I can show you. Tomorrow I need to, tidy up in there first." Jessica agreed to return the next morning, giving me one night to finally face whatever lay behind that locked door. As I watched her drive away, I felt a strange mix of dread and curiosity that had been building for 6 months, or perhaps for 12 years. That night I barely slept. From my bedroom window, the garage looked the same as always, a simple structure that had somehow become the repository of my husband's secrets. Tomorrow I would finally discover what he had been hiding all these years. Morning arrived with a pale October sun that did little to warm the chill in the air or the cold fear in my stomach. I'd been awake since 4 rehearsing this moment, imagining everything from a simple, messy workshop to something more sinister like evidence of illegal activities or strange collections. After 3 cups of coffee and hours of procrastination, I finally took James's keyring from the hook by the back door and walked the stone path to the garage. My heart pounded so hard I could feel its rhythm in my fingertips as I sorted through the keys, looking for the one that would unlock my husband's secrets. The large brass key slid into the lock with a smooth familiarity, as though it had been waiting for this moment. It turned with a heavy click that seemed to echo in the quiet morning air. I stood for a long moment, hand on the doorknob, gathering courage. "It's just a garage," I whispered to myself. "Whatever's inside you can handle it." I pushed the door open, revealing darkness beyond. My hand found the light switch just inside the door, flicking it upward with a trembling finger. Fluorescent lights buzzed to life overhead, illuminating a space that was nothing like what I had imagined all these years. This was not a workshop, not a man cave, not a storage space filled with tools and half-finished projects. It was a home. A fully furnished studio apartment had been meticulously created inside the garage's shell. To my left, a kitchenette with modern appliances gleamed under the harsh lighting. A small dining table with 2 chairs sat nearby a vase of flowers, now withered and dried at its center. Beyond that, a living area with a comfortable-looking sofa and television. To my right, partially hidden behind a decorative screen, a double bed with rumpled sheets and a bathroom with the door slightly ajar. I stepped inside my mind, struggling to process what I was seeing. The space was warm, inviting, lived in. Not at all what a garage abandoned for 6 months should look like. And that's when the full impact hit me. This space had not been abandoned for 6 months. Someone had been here. Recently. The mini fridge hummed in the silence as I crossed to it and pulled open the door. Inside, I found fresh milk, eggs, and produce. A loaf of bread sat on the counter beside it, soft and recently purchased. My legs weakened beneath me as I turned and noticed what the initial shock had caused me to overlook the photographs. Dozens of them framed and arranged on the walls and surfaces throughout the space. I moved closer, my vision tunneling as I focused on the smiling faces captured in the images. A woman beautiful and laughing with dark hair and warm brown eyes. A boy growing older in progressive pictures, his smile so achingly familiar it made my chest constrict. James, my husband, with his arms around them, both looking relaxed and happy in ways I recognized from our own photo albums. On the small desk near the sofa, I found a birth certificate for a boy named Thomas James Williams, born 10 years ago at Lakeside Hospital, just 1 town over from where we lived. Mother Sophia Williams, Father James Miller. 10 years. This child, this other family, had existed for 10 years of our 12-year marriage. My knees finally gave way as the room began to spin around me. I sank to the floor, clutching the birth certificate as though it might dissolve and take this nightmare with it. But the paper remained solid in my grip, its official seal and signatures confirming what my heart refused to accept. With numb fingers, I pulled open the desk drawer, finding a stack of birthday cards addressed to "My amazing son" and signed "Love, Dad." Years of cards showing a relationship that had flourished right under my nose. In another drawer, bank statements detailing regular transfers from an account I didn't know existed to Sophia Williams. Amounts that explained the depleted savings and maxed out credit cards. On the bedside table, a smartphone I didn't recognize. When I pressed the home button, it lit up without requiring a passcode. The wallpaper was a picture of the boy Thomas grinning widely to show missing front teeth. My fingers moved of their own accord, opening the text messages. A conversation thread with Sophia sat at the top, messages exchanged as recently as 2 days ago. "The garage feels empty without you," her most recent text read. "Thomas keeps asking when you're coming back. It's getting harder to explain your absence." Earlier messages scrolled past as I thumbed through their history. "When are you going to tell her about us? It's been 10 years, James. Thomas needs his father full-time." "I'm working on it. These things take time. Helene will be devastated." "We can't keep living like this. I deserve better. Thomas deserves better." "I know, love. Just a few more months. I promise." The last message from James had been sent the day before he died. "I'm telling her this weekend. Be ready to move in by next month. I love you both." The phone slipped from my fingers as bile rose in my throat. I barely made it to the bathroom before emptying the contents of my stomach. Clutching the cold porcelain, I tried to make sense of the evidence surrounding me. My husband had created an entire second life, a second home, a second family. He had been planning to leave me. All those years of what I thought was love and devotion had been elaborate lies. My phone rang from my pocket, startling me from my stupor. Jessica Morris's name flashed on the screen. "Helene, I'm 5 minutes away. Just wanted to let you know I'm running on time." I couldn't form words, couldn't imagine showing this space to anyone in my current state. "Helene, are you there? I'm sorry." I finally managed my voice a rasp. "Something's come up. Can we reschedule for next week?" I disconnected before she could ask questions, dragging myself to my feet. With one last haunted look at the life my husband had built without me, I stumbled out of the garage, locking the door behind me. Back in our house, I collapsed on our bed, the bed I had shared with a man who now seemed like a complete stranger. The sobs came then, violent and painful, tearing from my chest as 12 years of memories reshuffled themselves into a pattern of deception I had never suspected. Who had James Miller really been? And who was I, if not the beloved wife I'd believed myself to be? The days following my discovery in the garage became a blur of investigation and painful revelations. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything but uncovering the full extent of James's deception. The garage became both a source of torment and strange fascination, drawing me back repeatedly to search for more clues about the life he had hidden from me. I spent hours going through every drawer, cabinet, and storage space in that carefully constructed second home. Each item I found was another knife twisting in my heart. Anniversary cards celebrating years of a relationship that had run parallel to our marriage souvenirs, from trips taken on weekends when James had claimed to be at work, conferences, toys, and books belonging to a son he had never acknowledged to me. Then I turned my attention to our home, James's belongings, that I had left untouched in my grief. His home office, which had always been open to me during his life, now revealed its own secrets when I searched it with new purpose. In a locked filing cabinet, I found more correspondence with Sophia dating back to the earliest years of our marriage. I discovered financial records showing how he'd managed to fund 2 households on one salary by slowly draining our savings and accumulating debt. Most painful were the draft emails on his personal laptop, unsent messages to me explaining his decision to leave. "Helene, there's something I've needed to tell you for years," one began. "I never meant for things to happen this way, but I've built a life with someone else. We have a son together. I've tried to find the courage to tell you many times, but I couldn't bear to see the pain it would cause you." His words, meant to soften the blow he had been planning to deliver, only deepened my sense of betrayal. He had been constructing the narrative of our separation, even as he kissed me goodbye each morning, played the role of devoted husband each night. I obsessively searched for Sophia Williams online, finding her social media profiles set to private, but her professional page public. She was a graphic designer at a marketing firm in Riverside, the next town over. Just 40 minutes away all these years. Her profile picture showed the same beautiful woman from the photos in the Garage Professional, and poised with no hint of the secret life she shared with my husband. In her public gallery of work, I found professional photos of Thomas at various ages, used in advertisements for family-oriented businesses. The resemblance to James was unmistakable in the boy's expressions and mannerisms, visible even in still photographs. He had James's eyes, James's smile, even the same small dimple in his right cheek when he grinned. I didn't know what to do with my anger, my grief, my confusion. For days I alternated between rage so intense, I found myself throwing James's possessions against walls and numbness so complete I sat staring into space for hours. I avoided friends and family, ignoring calls and declining invitations, unable to share this humiliating truth with anyone. Finally, I called Amanda, my voice breaking, as I asked her to come over immediately. She arrived within 30 minutes, alarmed by my appearance when I opened the door. "You look terrible," she said bluntly, following me into the kitchen. "What's happened?" I wordlessly handed her the birth certificate I had taken from the garage, watching her expression shift from confusion to shock as she read it. "James had a son," she asked incredulously. "With another woman? And another home," I added flatly. "Come see." I led her to the garage, unlocking it to reveal James's secret life. Amanda moved through the space in stunned silence, taking in the details I had now memorized in my obsessive visits. "That bastard," she finally whispered, turning to pull me into a fierce hug. "That absolute bastard." Her anger somehow made the situation more real, validating the betrayal I felt. We returned to the house where Amanda poured us both large glasses of wine and listened as I detailed everything I had discovered. "You need to talk to a lawyer," she said when I'd finished. "James's legal loose ends could affect you financially even more than you already know. This woman Sophia and her son might have claims on his estate." "What estate?" I laughed bitterly. "There's nothing left but debt and lies." "Still, you need legal protection. I know someone who specializes in family law. Let me call her for you." 2 days later, I sat in the sleek office of Diane Abernathy, laying out my complicated situation while she took careful notes. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the occasional flicker of sympathy in her eyes. "This is certainly a complex case," she acknowledged when I'd finished. "From what you've described, there could indeed be potential claims against your late husband's estate, particularly regarding the child." "He's depleted most of our assets already," I pointed out. "What else could they possibly want?" "The house, potentially, life insurance benefits, future pension payouts. There are numerous financial entanglements that could affect you." She tapped her pen against her legal pad thoughtfully. "Before we proceed with any legal strategies, I'd recommend gathering more information about Ms. Williams and her son. Their circumstances and awareness of the full situation will influence how we should proceed." "You mean I should investigate them?" I asked, uncomfortable with the idea. "I mean we should hire a professional to do so," Diane clarified. "I work with a very discreet private investigator who specializes in family matters. With your permission, I'll engage his services." I agreed, feeling strange about investigating people who were in some ways victims of James's deception just as I was, but self-preservation won out over empathy, at least temporarily. A week later, I returned to Diane's office to review the PI's findings. The report was detailed and surprisingly poignant, painting a picture of Sophia Williams as a hard-working single mother who had believed for years that James was separated from his wife and in the process of divorce. According to the investigators' interviews with neighbors and colleagues, Diane summarized, "Ms. Williams told people that her son's father was working through a complicated divorce and would be moving in with them soon. This appears to have been her understanding for much of their relationship." The report included surveillance photos of Sophia and Thomas going about their daily routine images that made my heart twist with conflicting emotions. The boy looked so much like James that it was painful to see him a living reminder of my husband's betrayal. Yet he was clearly innocent in all this, a child who had grown up with a part-time father for reasons he couldn't possibly understand. Most revealing were the digital communications the PI had somehow accessed, showing that in recent months, Sophia had been pressing James to finalize their situation. There were draft divorce papers found on James's cloud storage prepared, but never filed. Evidence suggested he had indeed been planning to leave me the weekend after his sudden death. "So what does this mean for me legally?" I asked, trying to focus on practicalities rather than the emotional impact of these revelations. "It complicates things," Diane admitted. "If James had actually filed for divorce and openly acknowledged paternity of the child, the legal landscape would be clearer. As it stands, Ms. Williams could potentially challenge the distribution of assets, especially on behalf of her son. What should I do? Contact her directly?" Diane looked thoughtful. "That's not typically my advice in such situations, but given the circumstances and the fact that there are limited assets involved, a conversation might actually be the most efficient path forward. Just be careful what you say, make no promises, and certainly don't sign anything without consulting me first." I left the meeting with a business card-sized paper in my wallet containing Sophia's address, uncertain whether I would ever use it. The thought of confronting this woman of seeing James's son in person filled me with dread. Yet I couldn't stop thinking about them, couldn't stop wondering how much of what I thought I knew about my own life was real. The decision was made for me on a rainy afternoon 2 weeks later. I found myself driving past Sophia's address, a modest but well-kept bungalow in a family-friendly neighborhood of Riverside. I had no plan, no prepared speech, just an overwhelming need to see these people who had shared my husband in ways I never knew. I parked across the street telling myself I would just look at the house and drive away. But as I sat there, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. A woman emerged helping a boy with a backpack out of the passenger seat. Even from a distance, I recognized them immediately from the photographs. Sophia looked younger in person, her movements graceful as she guided Thomas toward the front door, her arm protective around his shoulders as they hurried through the rain. The boy laughed at something she said, his head thrown back in a gesture so like James that my breath caught in my throat. They disappeared inside, unaware of my presence. I sat frozen in my car, tears streaming down my face, unsure what I had hoped to accomplish with this surveillance. After 20 minutes of internal debate, I started the engine and drove away still without answers, but somehow feeling that a confrontation was inevitable. Our lives were too entangled by James's deception to remain forever separate. A week passed after my drive-by of Sophia's house, during which I tried to focus on practical matters, returning to work full-time, negotiating with creditors, considering my options for the house and garage. But thoughts of James's other family continued to haunt me, leaving me distracted and irritable. Then, on a Tuesday evening, as I was grading papers, an email notification appeared on my laptop. The sender's name made my heart stutter, Sophia Williams. The subject line was simple: "We should talk." With trembling fingers, I opened the message. "Helene, I saw you sitting outside my house last week. I've known who you are for many years, though. I realize you've only just learned about me. This situation is painful for both of us, and ignoring each other won't make it easier. James left us both with questions only we can help answer. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. There's a cafe called Bluebird on Main Street in Riverdale, halfway between our towns. I could meet you there tomorrow at 5 p.m. Sophia." I read the email multiple times, my emotions swinging wildly between indignation that she would contact me so directly and relief that I wouldn't have to initiate this inevitably awkward conversation. The fact that she had recognized me outside her house was unsettling. How much did she know about me? Had James shown her pictures, talked about me, compared us? After hours of deliberation, I replied with a terse agreement to the meeting. Sleep eluded me that night, as I imagined all the possible ways our conversation might go, from screaming accusations to tearful confessions. By the time I arrived at the Bluebird Cafe the following evening, I was exhausted and jittery from too much coffee and too little rest. I spotted her immediately sitting at a corner table with 2 cups already in front of her. She was even more beautiful up close, with a natural elegance that made me instantly conscious of my own appearance hastily assembled after a full day of teaching. As I approached, she looked up, her expression cautious, but not unwelcoming. "Helene," she said, neither a question nor a greeting, just an acknowledgement. "I ordered you a chamomile tea. James always said you preferred it to coffee in the evenings." The casual reference to my preferences coming from this stranger who knew intimate details of my life sent a chill through me. I sat down stiffly, leaving the tea untouched. "I don't know what to call you," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "The other woman, my husband's mistress." "You could try Sophia," she replied, showing no reaction to my hostility. "And technically, I could call you the same things. We both loved the same man, both believed we were central to his life. We were both deceived, just in different ways." Her calm response deflated some of my anger. "What do you mean you were deceived?" Sophia wrapped her hands around her mug, her expression thoughtful. "James told me he was separated from his wife when we first met. He said the divorce was complicated, dragging on because of property disputes. I believed him because I wanted to, because he was charming and attentive and seemed so honest about everything else." "When was this?" I asked, trying to place her story within the timeline of my marriage. 11 years ago. I met him at a conference in Chicago. I was just starting my design career and he was there representing his firm. We had an instant connection." She paused, studying my face. "He never wore his wedding ring at these events, did he?" The question hit me like a physical blow. James had indeed often forgotten his wedding ring during business trips, claiming it was uncomfortable during long flights. Another deception I had never questioned. "He pursued me for months after that conference," Sophia continued, "always making time to see me when he was in Chicago, then encouraging me to move to Riverside when a job opportunity came up. He said it would be easier for us to be together, that his almost ex-wife lived in the opposite direction, and we'd never run into each other." "And you believed all this?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "For a while, yes. But as months became years and the divorce never seemed to finalize, I started having doubts. Then I got pregnant with Thomas." Her expression softened at the mention of her son. "James was thrilled, which surprised me. He immediately started making plans for us, talking about finding a place where we could all live together once his divorce was final." "The garage," I said flatly. Sophia nodded. "At first it was just supposed to be temporary, somewhere private, where he could spend time with us without complicating his divorce proceedings. He renovated it himself, made it comfortable for us. When Thomas was born, James was there every weekend, many evenings. He was a good father." Her voice caught slightly. "Thomas adored him." I tried to reconcile this image with the husband I thought I knew, the man who spent weekends in what I thought was his workshop, who sometimes worked late, claiming client emergencies. "Didn't you ever wonder why after years he was still married, why you were still living in separate homes?" "Of course I did," Sophia said, a flash of defensiveness crossing her features. "We argued about it often, especially as Thomas got older and started asking questions about why his dad didn't live with us all the time. James always had explanations, reasons why the timing wasn't right yet. He could be very convincing when he wanted to be." "So you never checked, never drove by our house or looked me up?" Sophia looked down at her cup. "I did eventually. About 5 years ago I followed him one night when he said he was going to a business dinner. He went to your house instead. I saw you greet him at the door, saw him kiss you. It was devastating." "But you stayed with him," I pointed out, my tone accusatory. "Yes, I confronted him, and he finally admitted he was still living with you. But by then Thomas was 5. James was the only father he knew. And James swore he would leave you, that he just needed time to figure out how to do it without hurting you too badly." She gave a bitter laugh. "He was always so concerned about hurting you, even while he was hurting both of us with his lies." A heavy silence fell between us, two women processing the shared betrayal from different angles. "He was going to tell you," Sophia finally said, "that last weekend. He had promised me he would finally end things with you, had even started looking at houses where the 3 of us could live together openly." "I know," I said quietly. "I found the draft emails, the divorce papers." "And then he died." Sophia whispered, tears filling her eyes for the first time. "Just disappeared from our lives without warning." Thomas keeps asking when Dad is coming back. He doesn't understand. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of empathy for this woman, and especially for her son, who had lost a father just as suddenly as I had lost a husband. "I don't know why I wanted to meet you," Sophia admitted, wiping away a tear. "Maybe just to see the person he chose to stay with all those years instead of making a real life with us. Maybe to confirm that you really didn't know about us, that you weren't somehow complicit in keeping us a secret." "I knew nothing," I assured her. "Absolutely nothing, until I opened that garage door 6 months after he died." She nodded, seeming to accept this. "I've been using the garage still," she confessed. "James gave us keys years ago, and after he died, Thomas was so distraught that coming there, sometimes being in a space that felt like his dad's, seemed to comfort him. I hope you don't mind." I did mind, but I couldn't bring myself to say so. The thought of them continuing to use the space without my knowledge was unsettling, but their connection to it was as real as mine to the house James and I had shared. "What happens now?" I asked, finally taking a sip of the tea she had ordered for me. It had gone cold. "I don't know," Sophia replied honestly. "I have no interest in making your life more difficult. We're both just trying to pick up the pieces. But Thomas—" Her voice strengthened. "Thomas deserves to know about his father's life, to have connections to that part of him. Would you consider meeting him someday?" The request caught me off guard. Meeting James's son, the living proof of his infidelity, seemed like an emotional step I wasn't prepared for. Yet I was curious about this child who shared my husband's blood in ways I never could. "I'll think about it," I said carefully. "This is all still very new to me." Sophia nodded in understanding. "Of course. Whatever you decide, thank you for meeting with me today. It couldn't have been easy." As we prepared to leave, Sophia hesitated, then reached into her bag. "I thought you might want this," she said, handing me a photograph. "It was taken last Christmas." The image showed James and Thomas building a snowman together, both laughing at the camera, their identical smiles like mirror images across generations. Another piece of the life my husband had hidden from me, yet somehow holding it, felt important, a fragment of truth I needed to incorporate into my understanding of the man I had married. We parted with an awkward, formal handshake, two women connected by deception and loss, uncertain of where this strange relationship might lead. The weeks following my meeting with Sophia brought unexpected developments in my life. Despite my initial reluctance, I found myself agreeing to meet Thomas, an encounter arranged carefully to protect the boy's understanding of his father's complicated life. We met at a small park on a crisp Saturday afternoon, neutral territory for this strange introduction. I recognized Thomas immediately as he climbed out of Sophia's car, his movements and expressions so reminiscent of James that it caused a physical ache in my chest. Sophia had prepared him by explaining that I was a friend of his father's, someone who had known James for many years. At 10, Thomas was old enough to be curious, but young enough to accept this simplified explanation without too many questions. "Hello, Thomas," I said, my voice catching slightly as he approached. "I'm Helene." He studied me with serious eyes, James's eyes, before offering his hand formally. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Helene. Mom says you knew my dad really well." "I did," I confirmed, shaking his small hand. "For many years." We walked through the park together, Thomas between Sophia and me, his presence creating a strange bridge between two women who should have been rivals but were finding their way to something more complicated. Thomas was initially shy, but when I mentioned I had taught fifth-grade students just his age, he warmed up quickly, sharing stories about his school and friends. He was bright and articulate, with James's quick wit and analytical mind. "Did you and my dad work together?" he asked innocently, as we sat on a bench watching ducks in the pond. I caught Sophia's warning glance over his head. "No, we didn't, but we spent a lot of time together." "Do you miss him too?" The directness of children can be disarming. "I do," I admitted. "Very much." Thomas nodded sagely. "Mom says it's okay to be sad, but we have to remember the happy times too. Like when Dad taught me how to build a circuit board, or when we went camping and saw shooting stars. I listened as Thomas shared memories of a James I had never known, the patient father who spent weekends teaching his son about electronics, who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, who promised camping trips and museum visits that would now never happen. "He said when I get older he'd teach me how to drive," Thomas said wistfully. "Now I don't know who will." The simple statement filled with childish grief broke something open in me. This boy had lost not just a father, but a future filled with promised moments. Whatever James had done wrong, his love for his son had clearly been genuine. "I have some pictures of your dad from when he was younger," I offered impulsively. "From before you were born. Would you like to see them sometime?" Thomas's face lit up. "Really, Mom doesn't have many old pictures." Sophia gave me a surprised but grateful look. "That would be wonderful, Helene. Thomas treasures everything that helps him feel connected to James." As our meeting drew to a close, Thomas asked if he could show me a trick James had taught him. He produced a coin from his pocket and performed a simple sleight of hand that James had often used to entertain our friends' children. Watching his small fingers execute the move with James's characteristic flourish made me smile through unexpected tears. "You do that just like he did," I told him, and Thomas beamed with pride. When it was time to leave, Thomas shocked me by giving me a quick, spontaneous hug. "Will I see you again?" he asked. I looked to Sophia, who nodded slightly. "Yes," I promised. "I think you will." That first meeting opened a door to something none of us could have anticipated. Over the following months, as I continued sorting out the financial and emotional aftermath of James's deception, Thomas became an unexpected connection to the good parts of the man I had loved. Sophia and I developed a cautious friendship built on our shared experience. We both harbored anger toward James, both struggled with reconciling the man we thought we knew with the elaborate deceptions he had maintained. Yet we also found relief in being able to speak honestly with someone who truly understood the complex grief of losing someone, while simultaneously discovering they were not who you believed them to be. I did sell the house eventually, finding a smaller place closer to my parents that better suited my single income. The garage, however, presented a more complicated decision. After much consideration, I offered to sell it to Sophia at a reduced price, allowing her and Thomas to convert it fully into a guest house they could use or rent out as needed. The space that had been the physical embodiment of James's deception became ironically a source of healing as we transformed it together, removing the secrecy while preserving the comfort it offered Thomas. My financial situation gradually stabilized. With Diane's legal help, James's debts were sorted out, with both Sophia and I agreeing to certain compromises regarding his minimal remaining assets. I returned to teaching full-time, finding solace in the predictability and purpose of my classroom. Most of James's belongings were donated to charity after I kept a few meaningful mementos for myself and set aside others for Thomas when he was older. The process of clearing out our shared life was painful, but ultimately liberating each box that left the house, taking with it some of the weight of betrayal I had carried. Dating again seemed impossible at first, but about a year after James's death, I met David, a widower, who understood the complicated nature of grieving someone while also being angry with them. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honesty and transparency in ways my marriage had not been. That first Christmas, after discovering James's secret life, I made the surprising decision to include Sophia and Thomas in my family's holiday gathering. My parents, after initial shock at the situation, embraced Thomas with unexpected warmth, seeming to understand that he was an innocent connection to the son-in-law they had loved despite his flaws. The day I finally removed my wedding ring was both sad and freeing. I placed it in a small box along with other keepsakes from my marriage, not discarding the past, but putting it in proper perspective. James had loved me in his way, even while betraying me in fundamental ways. The contradiction was something I had come to accept, however painfully. Through therapy and time, I began to forgive, not for James's sake, but for my own. Holding on to anger only prolonged my suffering and prevented me from moving forward. Forgiveness didn't mean excusing his actions, but refusing to let them define the rest of my life. The most unexpected gift in this difficult journey was my evolving relationship with Thomas. I became a kind of aunt figure in his life, someone who could share stories about his father's talents and kindness, while Sophia helped him understand in age-appropriate ways that adults sometimes make complicated choices and mistakes. I would never have chosen this path, never imagined that my husband's greatest betrayal would eventually lead to expanded connections and a different kind of family. Yet in the unraveling of the life I thought I had, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed and built new relationships founded on truth rather than deception. Life offers no guarantees, no certainty that those we love are exactly who they present themselves to be. But in facing the painful truth of my husband's double life, I found my way to an authentic existence that honors both the grief of what was lost and the possibility of what might still be. Have you ever discovered someone close to you wasn't who they seemed to be? How did you handle that revelation? Leave a comment below sharing your experience, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and recovery. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most unexpected discoveries can lead to the most profound growth. Even in our darkest moments, healing is possible when we face the truth with courage.